inaugural edition of Ask President Soto, a new program here in the village of Bensenville, where we're going to have the opportunity to talk to Village President Frank Soto and answer and address questions that come to him from the community through a variety of sources. Hi everybody, I'm Jim Mitchell, and I mentioned those questions. Throughout the month we'll collect questions either through askthepresident@bensenville.il.us or on a phone machine at 630-594-1600. So at any time you can send questions in. We'll gather them up, and each month have the opportunity to address them for you here on the program. And so with that, let's get started. President Soto, thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
It's great to be here.
Great opportunity for your residents to get some answers and talk about some things. One of the first ones, I'm sure you've talked about this a lot. This is a question that was actually posted on Facebook. And there was some comment about all the things that need to get done in the city. There's flooding, there's sewer work, and there's always a long list. The question was, how were you able to fund a police station with all the other needs that were current at the same time?
Well, the village has taken kind of a systematic approach. It really started back in 2009 and 2010 when we had what were called resident summits or citizen summits. And when we sat down with the residents, they helped us design a strategic plan. What did they want to see fixed? And also set up a priority of what those items were. Now, the flooding issues that we had were numerous when we took office back in 2009, and the majority of those flooding issues have all been corrected or resolved. There are still some continuing areas that are very costly and very, I would say very difficult to fix.
Right.
And that process is still underway. Each year we try to tackle another project because to do so on a global basis would be just almost impossible to do without significant tax increases on property taxes. And actually that's one of the issues that Elmhurst is currently facing. They have a lot of flooding area, and the cost of doing such a large scale project to handle it all at one time would be incredibly costly. Now, most of these programs are done through grants. We receive money or grants or special interest loans to do these projects. So the police station was done with a separate grant, and that grant was a low interest loan. And the money that pays for that was from dedicated revenues. So the building a police station has really no impact because the funds that are being created from a revenue source is used to offset the cost of building that police station. So that's one of the reasons why we've been able to do as many projects in town as we have been able to do, and we haven't been raising property taxes, just very small incremental increases each year, usually about 1.2% to 1.4%, which only offsets some of the union contract raises that we have.
Right.
But we've been really running a balanced budget every year and still doing all of these projects. So they're really not related projects. Or one doesn't cost the other one anything. What creates the issue on the remaining flooding issues is you have to do so many other infrastructure repairs in order to cure that. Just putting new pipes in there won't do any good.
Right.
You're just going to be flooding everybody else out. And that's what we're doing right now.
Now you mentioned going back to the start of your administration, half a dozen years ago or so, and you talked just now about all the different pieces that have to come together. I know you also wanted to address briefly here some changes that are happening within the village staff, some senior members that are moving on. You want to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of impact?
Yeah. Now, we just had a couple staff members move on, our village manager, our assistant village manager, and our finance director. Well, people recognize from other communities all of the advancements that Bensenville has made and how many gains we've made in a very short period of time in so many areas. Like our industrial park, we've done a TIF in our industrial park. So we had an industrial park that really was costing taxpayers money because what was happening is the property values continued to fall there because they had high vacancy rates. And that means the tax burden is picked up by the residential community. So what we did is we realized that if we can recreate our industrial park, those properties will no longer be vacant, which means those property values don't fall, which means the taxes that they pay would go up, which means that the burden on our residential community would go down. And we looked at the industrial park, and it was in dire need of reconstruction. It also flooded tremendously. And we invested in a project there, And we've repaved all the streets, we've cured the flooding problems there, and now, as of this year, our industrial park has a vacancy rate of 2.2%, which is the lowest vacancy rate in what they call the sub-O'Hare market. It's lower than Elk Grove, Franklin Park, Wooddale, and even Addison and Itasca. And what that's done is it's drived up the values of those properties, which has allowed us to do so many projects without causing an impact on our residents by doing these projects. But other communities see their talent.
Right.
And when they see that we have great young talent here, they start to recruit that talent. And now we've seen our village manager, he's heading out now to Mount Prospect, which is a great city. He's also being paid a lot more money than he was in Bensonville. Our assistant village manager, who came here from Naperville, is now the village manager in Oswego, again being paid a lot more money. And our finance director accepted a job and was recruited and is now in, I believe he's in Winnetka, being paid, I think, about $40,000 to $50,000 more a year just to make that move.
Right.
But, you know, we have a very good group of talent and a lot of young talent behind them. So we have people that are just stepping up that are incredibly well trained, and we're able to fill those gaps, and at least at the finance director levels. And then what we're doing is we're starting a recruiting process like we did last time to bring in another village manager. And then we want the village manager to hire the assistant village manager. This way they kind of create their team and keep that, you know, I would call it more of a corporate business mentality of how you want to organize your structure in place.
Yeah, great way to run things, really.
Yeah.
All right, now this next one I know we could probably do an entire program on, so it'll be a tough one to, I think, you know, condense for us, but big topic, the Dominic's building. I know it's one that has impacted many communities, and you among them, and a lot of requests, including this one via email, saying, you know, we need another store here. What's going on?
You know, we have been working continuously on trying to get a new store there. The owner of that shopping mall is a company called Phillips Edison, and they own properties throughout the nation. In fact, their home office is in Nevada. And Dominic's, when they vacated the Chicagoland market, because they're a Canadian-based company, at least Safeway was. Safeway bought Dominic's, and Safeway was very big in the South and Florida, but they're also very big, or their home offices in Canada. They realized that it was probably too competitive a market in the Chicagoland, so they pulled out of the Chicagoland market, left a number of vacant stores.
Right.
So Jewel or Butera bought all of the leases from Safeway. This is all in the middle of all of this going on. 7 years still on a lease. They're still paying rent. And so we approached Jewel and met with them and went through their process and said, you know, you can put a very viable store here. And originally they were very reluctant. They actually wanted to pay to keep it dark because the Bensonville residents were driving to Wooddale, Addison, Elmhurst to go to the Jewels.
Their stores, right. Yeah.
And we went through their committee, they looked at it, they reevaluated that decision and decided just recently to go ahead and put in a new store.
Oh, okay.
So just last week at a board meeting, we met with the owners and their staff members, and we signed a new tax sharing incentive agreement to get them here, to get it over the hurdle. It doesn't cost the village any money because right now we're not generating any revenue from there or sales tax, but what we're doing is a sharing agreement where we're sharing a portion of the sales tax that they would otherwise generate, and that money is going back for the upgrades to their store, because one of the conditions we wanted them to do is update the store and have it be a very nice store within their chain, not just any store, and that's occurring now. So that just happened at the last board meeting.
Well, that's great news. That's excellent news. On a much smaller scale, I know you recently completed repaving the Metro lot. There was a question that came in via email about striping and numbering the slots there. Is that all part of the process? Yeah,
the Metro lot, you know, part of it is run or maintained by the village, but also part of it is maintained by Metro. So there are some things that the village does and maintain. Now, we did just restripe the Metro light, but before we could restripe it, we actually had sections of the driveway or parking lot that had to be rebuilt, dug out and rebuilt. And this was part of a larger process, because one of the things that we were trying to do is put in a quiet zone in Bensonville. So from basically now, trains no longer blow their whistle coming through Bensonville. So that goes from York Road all the way to basically Wooddale. Well, that process is a multi-year process in which you can get approval, or you need to get approval from the federal government.
Okay.
And what they require you to do is a number of design changes to those intersections to make them as safe as possible.
Right.
So then all of those changes had to be made. And that included changing of the direction of how you can get in and out of that lot.
Oh, okay.
And because of that had to be changed, the lot itself had to be redone. And so that couldn't really be done until the springtime. So those lots, sections of them have all been fixed. The concrete has been put in there. And then the next process is just the putting down the stripers.
Okay. Now I know you publish on a regular basis a Gateway newsletter for your residents here in Bensenville, and one of the topics that has been covered there periodically has been Mohawk School, that old location, and the fact that there was a new park slated for that. What's the status? How's that progressing?
You know, that's finally taking shape. I mean, something we've been an advocate for because we think that area needs a park.
Mm-hmm.
There are really no parks on the north side of Route 83. And when the school districts consolidated their schools and built the two new schools, you know, we really looked at that as being a very viable park area. Parks generally allow the kids a place to go where they don't have to cross Irving Park Road. It allows people to exercise and just enjoy the facilities. It increases the property values in those areas. So the village was very much in favor and wanted to see a park go in there. The difficulty is that it isn't the village that owns the property. Mm-hmm. District 2, the school district owned that property, and the parks are actually built and maintained by the park district. These are all separate taxing entities. So you have the park district, you have the school district, and then you have the village. So the village came in and said, we'll help any way we can to make this occur. So then it really becomes a very kind of a difficult process, because then the school district and park district have to reach an agreement. Mm-hmm. And each of them have issues that they have to address for years away from now. The school district has to address the fact that they would be giving up land that could, if a number of residents in town increases beyond their capability, they would like to have some land where they could still grow. Mm-hmm. And the park district looks at it differently. You know, they're more concerned with, we can swap land out, but we have to build a park, and then we have to budget, and that takes a year to 2 years to be able to create that type of funding. And also they're applying for grants to be able to build that. So, you know, recently I think all of the entities have finally got together. The grants have been applied for, and construction has already started. So this process is just beginning. So what's going to occur now is there'll be some public meetings in those areas to see what kind of park that they want.
Okay.
And from that, we'll see the design come out of that, and then eventually the park will be there.
Good, good. Well, that's one of those things, as you said, takes a while, but glad to hear that there's progress. We've got an email here, and I'm not going to read it. It was rather lengthy, but it really focused on a particular topic, which is a lawsuit that had been enacted regarding approximately 12 homeowners north of Irving around Hillside and Church. The person who wrote this was asking if there's an agreement on that and what they can expect from that resolution.
Yeah. The issue involves more or less the difficulty it is to live there with the runways mm-hmm. designed the way they are, and the current pattern of flights that are going over their house, which is unfortunately abnormally high and unbearably high right now. And that's partly due to the fact that 2 other runways that were parallel to the runways facing Bensenville were supposed to already be built and online. Mm-hmm. And those were supposed to go online by 2015, and that would have created relief. So not all of the flights would have to come over our town in a certain flow or wind pattern. Well, there was a lawsuit by United and American Airlines against the airport, or the OMP, and they settled that lawsuit that basically said that the OMP would not build those right away, and they would sit on them until they had another types of funding mechanisms or some type of use, but United and American didn't really want to be involved with the cost of building those.
Sure.
Well, you know, that's all nice, you know, between them, but the problem is it's not nice for the residents of Bensenville. Right. So because those 2 runways, which were parallel, would have taken a majority of the flights off of from flying over our houses, mm-hmm. That prevented that from happening. So I think what the lawsuit is really involving is whether or not there's some type of damages that the residents there have, it would primarily be against the airlines or the airport for the, the impact upon their houses created by the noise. It really doesn't involve the village because the village hasn't done anything or been involved with, creating that situation.
Okay.
And the difficulty is that I think there's a misidentification as to what's going on there, and the people there are just very desperate. I mean, it's very difficult for them, and it's an easier venue to come in and talk to the village or to put the village as being the cause of this, but it isn't the village at all. It is really the OMP, and the village, when in 2009 when we took office, the issue with the airport design and configuration was already done. Bensenville had been in a very long, protracted lawsuit with the city of Chicago for years. It was about 2005 where the village had lost that last lawsuit. And at that point, the fight was over. By 2005, it was done. All of the rights that the village may have had been decided by the courts and against the village. So in 2009, when we came into office, what we looked at is what are we dealing with? What's left here to try to anticipate this noise? How do we try to correct it or mitigate it as much as possible? So we started joining the ONCC, getting involved with SOC again, and dealing with hiring experts to figure out how operationally could they operate at the airport that could create a buffer or mitigate noise in Bensenville. And that's really where we've been fighting that battle, but in a different way. We understand that the lawsuit is lost, but what we can do is try to create a coalition of other villages to how that airport should be operated to create as much mitigation as possible for the communities. So we've joined with FAIR and the ONCC and as well as SOC. And we even hired our own experts, both locally as well as federally, on a federal level, to figure out strategies on changing laws and what have you to also create additional benefits for the village of Bensenville residents. And one of the most striking successes we had is we've been able to change the noise metrics that is currently used by the state. It was called a DNL, it was 65 DNL, and that would basically take an average of how much noise is created for a certain period of time. And now that's been changed to what's called the CNEL, which is a new standard.
Okay.
That standard is very heavily used in Europe, and there's only one other state, which is California, that has adopted the CNEL. Bensenville was a sponsor and a champion of this strategy, which is just more of a mid-level strategy. We had a local strategy, we had a mid-level or state-level strategy, and we also have a federal strategy. So we're successful in having the governor get a bill passed, get it through both houses, and the governor to sign it, changing the noise standard. Now that will have an impact, but not a huge one. But this is one of those things where it's a death by 1,000 paper cuts, and we have to be working on multiple strategies at one time to be able to create some type of relief for these people.
Okay. Village President Frank Soto is our guest on the program today. We're answering questions from the community. They can be submitted at any time at askthepresident@bensenville.il.us and by calling 630-594-1600. And that phone number is where we got this next question. And we're talking about village residents. This one actually probably deals more with people who are not village residents. President Soto, if you drive through town up near White Pines, you see a lot of signs that say no annex. And the phone message here from a resident was saying, what's that all about?
Well, this deals with the White Pines water system. Now, the White Pines area is an unincorporated area of town, so they're not part of, they're not Bensenville residents, they're unincorporated. Well, Bensenville, the village of Bensenville, supplies water and sewer services to this community. Well, this system has been decaying over years. There were several attempts years and years ago to upgrade their system because it's actually fairly dangerous. Not only is it dangerous that the fire department doesn't have good capacity to put out fires there, a lot of the lines are in backyards and they're under garages and very difficult and costly for the village to get in there and fix or maintain. And the village historically has had what's called water loss. Now, the village, when we took office, had somewhere in an area of about 28% of the water that comes in through DuPage Water Commission, which we turn around and we bill the residents. About 28% of that, 24 to 28% of it was lost. It was just being dissipated throughout problems with our system. So we started systematically repairing our system, with the most obvious areas where it could be being taken or used or breaks, which is in our northern industrial area, and then kind of hitting all of the areas, which we've done all of them now, except for the White Pines area. And we've gotten our water loss rates down to somewhere around 14% now, but this is the only area. Okay. And there's no easy way to get in there to fix it unless you're replacing the system. So what happens is, because of the White Pines system is so bad, a lot of the residents want, of that area, not residents of town, want, in a way, the village to pay for it or to pay a good portion of it. Mm-hmm. Well, as an advocate for the taxpayers of Bensonville, the residents that pay the property taxes that go toward the cost of, to do that, they would be bearing the cost. And we thought that really wasn't fair. It's not something that the residents should be paying for. But there would be a benefit if the residents, if that community would actually join the village of Bensonville. So we gave it to an option to the White Pines area to say, the village would pay for half of the cost of the to replace all of this, rather than you paying 100% if you join the village of Bensonville. And that's just to pay the loans. Mm-hmm. And that would take about 17 years with the additional property tax revenue and what have you to break even. But after this year 17, then it's a break-even point on behalf of the village. So it's worthy of the investment on behalf of the village, but it's also worthy for the investment for the people there, because they get their new water system, it's safer, and they get to pay residential water rates now. Mm-hmm. But the community there really didn't want it, but it was always their choice. Yeah. We put that as an option for you. If you can get 51% of the people who want to join, we'll work with you on this. If you don't, then it's really up to you.
Okay. Well, we've got a number of questions here, and we're getting very short on time, so I'm going to do kind of a quick word association with you, a couple of quick questions, and I think some of these are ones that you can direct quick answers to. First of all, Church Road, in terms of repaving of that.
That's underway. We originally started with that. We received a grant, and a lot of people said, hey, this is a bad way, and it is bad. The difficulty is a lot of that property isn't in the village of Bensonville. A lot of that property is actually unincorporated, and it isn't really, something that the county would normally fix, not the village. But we looked at that area. We said it really doesn't matter. We need to get it fixed because it's bad. And so we applied for a grant, and we were able to receive a grant where there's matching funds in it on behalf of the county, and then it's actually coming from money from the state. Well, then we had some strategic planning sessions, and one of the things that was a concern with a lot of residents was they wanted to see greater bike paths, not only to the downtown area, but also to a great trail system that currently goes through Addison and Wooddale, and technically you could jump on the Prairie Path from Wooddale and go all the way to Geneva. So people wanted to see access to that area. So we applied for another grant, which we received, which was a better grant that allowed a bike path to be put along Church Road and do the road project simultaneously. And it just seemed like the right fix. So that has all been done. The grant was applied for, and it's in final engineering now, and it requires an agreement with the Park District, because a lot of trees would have to be knocked down, which are dead anyways because of the emerald ash borer. Yeah. And it saves the Park District a lot of money, because now they don't have to take those trees down, and the village will come in there, take it as part of the bike path. Okay. Now that also gives people the ability to ride their bikes now right to Grand Avenue, and then they can have an easier access to Brentwood Shopping Center, or they can go, to the west and hook up to the trail system.
Okay. You mentioned earlier the quiet zone and the work that was done around that. There was an email question here asking about the train whistles and when that was going to be under control. Can you declare victory there now?
Yeah, that's done.
Great.
So it was a multi-year process. You had to get approval at the FAA or a federal level, which we did, and then it was implementing in all of those changes. And some of them weren't ours. Some of them were Metro's or CP rail systems, and they had to do track changes, which were out of our hands. We had no control over that. All we could do is keep pestering them, and finally it got done and the quiet zone's in place.
Yeah, that's a big one. Now, another one I think, if I understand correctly, has also been addressed already, but just give me a quick update on the in-between over on Irving Park.
Yeah, we've had a number of new establishments in town. The in-between bar was being sold by the family, or that property was put up for sale by the family, the original family that had owned it, and that was bought by a local businessman who has property right in that area, and that's now called the Hodgepodge Lodge. It's kind of a rustic, Wisconsin-y looking establishment. And then we've had some other new additions into our town as well, which is the Brown's Chicken sold their property to Popeye's Chicken, and now that Popeye's is going in there. McDonald's just went in across the street. So we have a number of new additions to our town.
Yeah, and one of those that was mentioned here in a phone message is the great new park over by York and Green. The resident was very happy with that. And then they said they turned around and looked at a couple of gas stations that are behind it or across the street from it. As you do things like this in the community, do you have the ability to work with those business owners and try and get some beautification things done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's always been part of our strategic plan. Is there certain corridors we really want to focus in on improving? Irving Park corridor is one of them, and right now you see a lot of the repairs going in from new brickwork to expansion of the road to removal of a lot of poles and lights and overhanging wires. So when you come in there, that's really a corridor, you know, a nice corridor. So any opportunity we have that there is some type of work that needs the village's approval, then we'll go in there and we'll try to do some improvements to the aesthetics to beautify those properties.
Now, one of the other big changes that took place the last couple of years was the installation of new water meters, the smart meters. And again, I think people you know, have to get used to this technology, and the question is, well, you know, how do we know they're working right? How do we know that the metering is correct? Do you have a process that can sort of answer that question?
Yeah, they can contact the village hall.
Okay.
There is a whole testing mechanism that's done with them. In fact, this new technology is good for a couple of reasons. One, the village needed to get a handle on water loss. And we had a number of old meters, and actually we had a tremendous amount of meters that over the years people tampered with. So they couldn't rate or register exactly what the meters were running. So what was happening is that they were just getting average bills, and then manual readings would be taken, and then they would get a resident would get a large bill because it's not really reading, you know, it's averaging their water rates,
Right.
not their actual, until those readings would occur. And once the city of Chicago increased the price of water to DuPage, which was over, what, almost 135 to 150%, and then DuPage Water Commission increased our water rates over 100% as well, you know, that's not something that we really wanted to pass on to our residents. So one way to lower the impact is to control your water loss so you don't have to absorb that water loss in a cost. So replacing the meters and getting the meters that were either defective or that had been tampered with out of the circulation to get accurate meters in there that could be read. Basically, now they can be read through a Wi-Fi connection. I mean, they're taken basically instantaneous.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier some of the businesses changing in town, some economic development. One last question that came in was about Anderson's Bakery here in town. Is that closing? Or?
Yeah, Andreessen's, and I don't believe it is. I think that what they did is they signed a new lease. You know, there was a new owner of that shopping center, and the new owner of the shopping center is redoing that entire grocery store that was there, which was Edmar. And the Edmar group had been selling their shopping centers or their grocery stores for a number of years. In fact, this particular owner, Chiquita, has, I think they purchased 3 other Edmars. And so they're reinvesting into that grocery store, and they're doing it in a kind of a piecemeal basis. So I think the issue with Andreessen's is they just had to renegotiate their lease with the landowner.
Good. Well, that's great news and a great way to wrap up our first program here with Village President Frank Soto. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, if you'd like to be a part of the program in future months, you can send your questions in via email to askthepresident@bensonville.il.us, or if it's easier to leave a phone message, 630-594-1600. We'll address all those questions in our next edition. We hope you'll join us for that.